Hey, how's it going? In 1899, in New York, Dr. Alexander Haddedegger teaches mechanics and engineering at Columbia University. He is obsessed with science and innovation, but his musings on Einstein, solar energy, and urban plans are not taken seriously. This obsession distracts him from many of his other responsibilities, including a rendezvous with his girlfriend in the park tonight. After his friend David Haddedegger reminds him, Alexander rushes home, dresses up, and goes to the park, realizing he should also buy flowers, but gets distracted by another innovation, a steam car. When it accidentally starts, Alexander pulls the brake to stop the vehicle in time. He then hurries to meet his girlfriend Emma, taking her for a ride in the park, apologizing for the lack of flowers, but offering something much better, a marriage proposal. Emma accepts, and Alexander puts a beautiful birthstone ring on her finger. The couple is ecstatically happy and in love. Suddenly, an armed thief snatches Alexander's wallet and tries to take the ring too. Alexander attempts to stop him, and in the struggle, the gun accidentally discharges into Emma. While the thief escapes, Alexander holds Emma as she dies in his arms. Over the next 4 years, Alexander becomes depressed and does nothing but work all day, convinced he can somehow bring Emma back. He ignores his friend David, the only one who still visits him. But one day, Alexander finally reveals his latest invention, a time machine. He sits in it, activates it immediately, traveling back to the night of Emma's death after a bright light surrounds him. He reappears in the park, sees Emma, and misses her so much that he kisses her and takes her out of the park to avoid the thief. They take a carriage to the city center, and Emma reminds him that he promised her flowers. Alexander enters a shop to buy them, and at that moment, a carriage causes an accident in the street. Alexander witnesses Emma's death again. Later, at the morgue, Alexander realizes that if he keeps going back, he'll only see Emma die suddenly, as he can't change that. So, instead, he decides to travel to the future to see if advanced science there can change the past and maybe provide the answers he needs. Returning to the time machine, Alexander chooses to go to the future, and as the machine glows again, he observes everything around him changing, from the plants in his building to the clothes in the stores, and suddenly, he accidentally drops the locket with a photo of Emma, causing it to disappear over time. He arrives in the year 2030 and marvels at the apartment buildings and screens everywhere. Someone mistakes his machine for a coffee maker, and his outfit is retro. He goes to the New York Public Library, where he discovers that books are now relics. But there's a set of giant screens projecting Vox, a holographic library, and Vox has access to all databases from every library on Earth. Alexander asks why he can't change the past. Vox simply states that time travel is not possible and begins listing science fiction works and even singing a soundtrack from famous movies. Frustrated, Alexander returns to the time machine to go a little further into the future. Suddenly, he feels some tremors and stops in the year 2037, finding the entire city destroyed. He is soon found by soldiers who want to help with the evacuation because the moon is simply falling apart. Alexander looks up to confirm this disturbing claim, but at that moment, something explodes on the ground. He manages to free himself and return to his machine. However, an earthquake hits the machine and he faints, continuing the time travel for thousands of years. The Earth changes around Alexander, going through dozens of climates in a new ice age. Alexander briefly wakes up to find himself in the year 8,002,701 and faints again. Some time later, Alexander dreams of Emma while a mysterious person tends to his injuries. When he wakes up and dresses, a child named Calum watches him, but Alexander doesn't understand the language he speaks. Calum runs away, and Alexander follows him, discovering a village built on a gorge over the river. Calum shouts to some people, and all the villagers come to check, but the only one who speaks English is Mara, the woman who is taking care of him and is also Calum's sister. The villagers wonder if they should throw the stranger into the river, so he tries to explain that he comes from the past, but Mara translates it as Alexander being a fool who just hit his head. They hear a signal announcing bedtime, and Alexander goes with Mara and Calum to spend the night with them. He also shares some stories with Calum about the great city and gives him his pocket watch. As Calum falls asleep, Mara explains that his parents are dead, so Alexander takes a look outside and sees the broken moon, thinking he has gone too far. That night, Alexander dreams of a face calling his name, followed by the giant head of a roaring monster. He wakes up quite scared. Calum is also having a nightmare and suddenly hears the word Malak. Mara quickly calms him down and realizes that the pocket watch is missing. When Alexander asks about the nightmare, Mara says everyone has the same dream but refuses to explain what Malak means. Mara shows that Alexander was the collection of building pieces she gathered from various parts of the earth over the years. Mara has been striving to preserve the moon, conserve ancient culture, and says that English is already prehistoric. She tries to maintain and teach the culture to others. On the way back, Alexander wonders why he hasn't seen older or elderly people, so Mara says they are all dead, without explaining why. The remaining villagers are currently working in the fields with the help of windmills, but Mara takes Alexander to show him where his time machine is. Thus, Alexander is pleased that his machine still works, and he prepares the machine. At that moment, Mara asks him to take Kale with him, but cannot explain why. She hears a noise and runs to find her brother, and Alexander follows her, discovering that the Murlocs are actually monstrous beings that hunt people. That's why there are no older people in the village, as they are not fast enough. The villagers then run as fast as possible to escape. The Murlocs use darts to knock them down, and Mara looks for Kale. She is also hit by a dart, and Alexander rushes to remove it. Realizing it has a very strange substance, the villagers try to reach the river to escape, but the path is blocked when larger Murlocs start emerging from the ground. These Murlocs grab the villagers hit by the darts, tie them up, and take them sinking back into the ground. Suddenly, Kalen screams for help because he has also been hit by a dart, and the Murloc is going to get him. Mara wants to save him, but Alexander pushes the Murloc in time while Kalen escapes. Alexander hits the creature with a tool and starts running, and the Murloc pursues Alexander. When he jumps, Alexander dodges, causing the monster to roll towards the jungle. Alexander climbs one of the windmills, and when Murloc returns and grabs his legs, he kicks until the monster falls. However, Murloc doesn't give up and quickly climbs the windmill until reaching Alexander at the top, and they fight until falling together to the ground. Murloc grabs Alexander by the neck, ready to kill, but Kalen appears and stops him with a torch. They hear Mara screaming, so the Murlocs sink back into the ground, while Alexander and Kalen run back, discovering that Mara has been taken. Even trying to dig the ground was in vain, and he was upset and frustrated. He then asks the villagers why they didn't fight back, and one of them explains that in their world, those who resist are taken first. Alexander asks Kalen where people are taken, but he replies that they shouldn't talk about that place. However, later that night, Kalen sneaks out of the village to take Alexander to that place. It turns out to be an ancient underground cave. Alexander discovers that it's the ruins of the New York Library, and while the books disintegrate into ashes, the batteries are intact. This allows Box to appear normally and even remember Alexander. He explains that humans evolved into two different species, the villagers living above and the Morlocks living below. Vox once found a villager who managed to escape and came from the jungle to the east. Alexander just needs to follow the breathing to find him. Calum and Alexander set out and follow the sound of breathing through the jungle until they find the giant head of his dreams that should serve to ward off people. Alexander tells Calum to return to the village and light a fire to find the way back after rescuing Mara. Then Alexander enters the mouth of the statue, slides, and falls underground, saving himself at the last second. He holds on as a flock of bats flies very close to him and then descends slowly until he finds some machines, indicating that he's on the right path. Suddenly Alexander sees some Murlocs passing, and he hides behind a wall, moving carefully until he finds the group of workers together. Alexander goes down an empty corridor and finds a pile of villagers' clothes, which includes Mara's necklace, but he also sees a lot of disturbing tools. Startled, he accidentally falls into a well full of skeletons as the Murlocs hunt villagers for food. But at that moment, the Murloc leader finds him and locks him immediately in this room, and Alexander finds Mara in a cage. But she doesn't respond, just stares blankly, and when Alexander turns around, he sees a strange pale man, known as Abermurlik, the leader of the pale-faced race from his dreams. He explains that after the fall of the moon, the Earth could no longer sustain humans. Some people managed to survive above, but the rest escaped underground. They spent so many centuries down there that when they tried to come out again, the sun hurt them. In the end, they reproduced into different castes. The Supreme Murloc belongs to the caste that expanded cerebral abilities, so he can see and control others' thoughts. He controls other Murlocs so that they don't consume too much and deplete food supplies. He also controls the villagers to use them as food and also women to use them for reproduction. And that's the plan for Mara. Furious, Alexander says that this is a corruption of all natural instincts, but the Supreme Murloc points out that natural evolution did this to them, and the only unnatural thing there is him traveling back in time to that point. He grabs Alexander by the neck and, with his power to control minds, shows Alexander how his life should have been. Alexander finds himself at home surrounded by successful inventions and his wife Emma with a couple of children, but the illusion quickly fades, and the Supreme Murloc explains why the past cannot be changed. Alexander built the time machine because Emma died, so if she lives, the machine won't be made, and Alexander can't use it to save her in the first place, and that's called a paradox. At this moment, the Supreme Murloc makes the machine appear and tells Alexander to go, as he has his answer. Alexander sits in the machine, but before leaving, asks the Supreme Murloc for the pocket watch. As he approaches, Alexander grabs it, activates the machine, and starts fighting him inside it. Alexander's blows aren't strong enough, and the Supreme Murloc reveals a knife. Then, Alexander is grabbed by the neck as usual, but hits the machine to make it lose steam, which hits the face of the Supreme Murloc and makes him fall. At the last second, the Supreme Murloc grabs Alexander's neck, but the machine starts going faster into the future, and the hanging monster ages at a rapid speed until it becomes nothing but ashes. When the machine finally stops, he's billions of years in the future and discovers that the Murlocs have wiped out all life on Earth. However, he doesn't give up. He goes back in time and saves Mara from the cage, then connects the time machine to the pocket watch, programming it for billions of years in the future, blinding the Murlocs who are coming after them. Alexander and Mara lock the door behind them and run until they reach the main room, where Alexander is hit by a dart, and Mara knocks down the Murloc, but the noise alerts the others, who start chasing them, following the smell of the dart. The duo quickly runs through the corridor, and Alexander throws his coat to distract the Murlocs with the scent while they start climbing out of the cave. At that moment, the pocket watch causes the machine to malfunction, and it suddenly explodes, killing all the Murlocs in the cave. The duo is saved at the last minute by the villagers brought by Kaylin, and together they retreat just before the giant head also explodes, sending a shockwave through the tunnels and ending everything. Alexander isn't even sad about losing the machine because he found a new home here, and he and Mara reunite. Some time later, Alexander takes Vox out of the cave so he can educate the village children. Then he takes Mara and Kaylin to see the site where his home used to be. At the same time, in the present, Alexander's friends are a little worried because he has been missing for a week, but at the same time, they are happy because it means he has finally found happiness. Thus ends The Time Machine, a 2002 science fiction and drama film, and I'll see you in the next video.